During the first Democratic presidential debate of the 2020 cycle, Univision's Jose Diaz-Balart posed the following question to the candidates.
Raise your hand if you think it should be a civil offense rather than a crime to cross a border without documentation.
Everyone on that stage raised their hand, including Senator Kamala Harris.
You're for decriminalizing border crossings. You were one of the people that raised their hand at the debate. Do you agree with AOC that we should get rid of DHS altogether?
That is not correct. I am not in favor of decriminalizing or not having consequence for. We have to keep. Let me just be very clear.
Yeah, please do. Under Title 8, United States Code Section 1325, any alien who enters or attempts to enter the United States at any time or place other than as designated by immigration officers is a criminal act. Violators can receive a sentence of up to 6 months in prison and shall be subject to a civil penalty of up to $250. This is all pretty straightforward stuff. However, there are certain lawmakers that don't fully understand this. Take, for example, this now classic exchange between former acting director of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Tom Homan and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Mr. Homan, with all due respect, legal asylees are not charged with any crime.
When you enter the country illegally, it's violation 8 United States Code 1325.
Seeking asylum is legal.
If you want to seek asylum and go through the port of entry, do it the legal way. The Attorney General of the United States has made that clear.
Okay.
And because improper entry into the United States is technically a criminal act, Democrats are trying to decriminalize it.
Down at the border, when people come here who are desperate, people come here whose lives have been turned upside down, people who come here to try to build a better future, then we need to treat them with humanity, and we need to follow the law.
Unless you're breaking the law by crossing the border illegally, of course, then you can do whatever the you want.
We have to have a secure border, but I am in favor of saying that we're not going to treat people who are undocumented across the border as criminals.
And that's where decriminalization comes in. By changing improper entry from a criminal offense to a civil offense, illegal immigrants would not get jail time and would only end up receiving a fine. A $250 fine, that'll seal the border. So what would happen if you're caught crossing the border? As an example, presidential candidate Julian Castro has introduced a policy plan that would effectively end the use of detention in conducting immigration enforcement, except in serious cases. So under this plan, anyone can go to a legal port of entry, cross a river, walk through the desert, tunnel under a wall, it doesn't matter. Because the federal government will then process and release migrants into the United States interior with temporary documents and work authorization until their immigration case is heard. But will the asylum seekers make their court dates? The answer may surprise you.
92% of individuals who filed asylum claims attended their court hearings between fiscal years 2013 and 2017. Asylum seekers released from detention to pursue their claims attend immigration court hearings nearly 100% of the time. 98% of mothers with children who were represented by legal counsel complied with court hearing obligations. Overwhelmingly, if these people are given any kind of counseling about the legal process or legal representation, they show up over 90% of the time. It's not the so-called, and I hate the term, catch and release that's being represented to this committee.
So if asylum seekers do in fact show up to their court hearings, then we have nothing to worry about, right?
But is it also fair to say what you're finding is if they lose the case, they don't show up for their deportation?
Well, we are seeing that, yes, unfortunately. And that requires ICE to go into a community to effectuate that order of removal.
So according to Acting Secretary of Homeland Security Kevin McAleenan, asylum seekers show up to their hearings, but when they lose their proceedings, they don't follow their deportation orders.
When they are denied an asylum status at the end of the hearing, they could be deported at that point, right?
They can, but ICE has to go into a community to effectuate that if they don't have
They're in a court, they're in a hearing setting when this is announced, isn't it?
No, the immigration judges often don't issue the final order until weeks after the last hearing. And so you actually have to get someone to...
Statistically, 90% of those who receive final orders of deportation do not show up to be repatriated to their country of origin. So much for the honor system. During the first 6 months of 2019, there have been nearly 535,000 people apprehended between ports of entry on the southwest border. That's a 163% increase over the same period in 2018, and a 412% increase over the same period in 2017. And the majority of border crossers come to the US for economic opportunity, but instead they apply for asylum.
We have a long tradition of generous asylum, which has been frankly swamped by a lot of fraudulent claims, and what that does is it clogs up a system for the legitimate claimants.
This surge of illegal border crossings and fraudulent asylum claims have resulted in hundreds of thousands of migrants being held in detention centers that are bursting at the seams. So you might be asking, if they're entering illegally, then why doesn't the Border Patrol just make them turn around? 18 U.S. Code Section 1158 allows any alien who is physically present in the United States or who arrives in the United States, irrespective of such alien status, to apply for asylum. And we're on track to hit over 1 million illegal border crossings by the end of the year, which means a few 100,000 more asylum claims that will need to be processed. Here's a crazy thought. Why don't we just build a wall along the southern border? Nah, it would never work. On July 16th, the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security implemented an interim final rule that will effectively stop the bleeding. Here's how it works. Let's say that a migrant claims to be escaping gang violence in Guatemala. Once that person crosses the border into Mexico, that person is out of harm's way and therefore should apply for asylum in Mexico. Because asylum is about safety and not shopping around for the country that's going to give you the best deal. The regulation requires that if you pass through a country before reaching the US and you did not apply for asylum there, then you will be ineligible to apply for asylum here.
This regulation will go a long way to helping us clear our over 300,000 case asylum backlog, and also the immigration judges over in the Department of Justice are closing in on a 900,000 case backlog, and as I said, being swamped at the border plays a big role in this.
Now let's say that that migrant from Guatemala is denied asylum in Mexico. Then and only then will they be eligible to apply for asylum in the United States. If the migrant is from Mexico and crosses the southern border into the United States, they will be allowed to make an asylum claim since the US is the first country that they crossed into.
But I've looked through the legal foundation of this regulation, and it is very clear, it is very strong.
And he's right. 8 U.S.C. 1158 clearly states that the Attorney General may by regulation establish additional limitations and conditions under which an alien shall be ineligible for asylum. All of this will be a strain on the Mexican government, whose asylum system is also overwhelmed, but they aren't the only ones that are going to have a problem with this regulation.
We're likely to be sued over this. There's very little we do these days that doesn't involve litigation, unfortunately.
Sad but true. The American Civil Liberties Union immediately released a statement saying, the Trump administration is trying to unilaterally reverse our country's legal and moral commitment to protect those fleeing danger. This new rule is patently unlawful and we will sue swiftly, which they did in a lawsuit the following day. The United Nations also chimed in, stating that these new rules are not in line with international obligations. The DOJ and Homeland Security make the argument that the new regulation is in line. But even if it wasn't, it's unclear what, if anything, the UN could do to force the United States to remove the additional limitations and conditions. Of course, all of this could be avoided if the United States Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, would properly address immigration-related loopholes and change the law.
We have loopholes that are so bad you can drive a truck through them. They could be solved in 15 minutes, would have those loopholes taken care of. Literally, everyone knows what they are. They're very simple.
For example, the majority of asylum seekers are family units, and courts have ruled that children and their parents can only be held together in a family detention center for 20 days. On day 21, they're let go. I mean, you could just separate the children from their parents, right? I mean, Who would have a problem with that? And not to sound unsympathetic, but why is it the responsibility of the United States to take in every single person who wants to live here?
We have a Statue of Liberty standing in New York Harbor with that beacon of light and hope saying, send us your tired and your hungry, send us your huddled masses yearning to breathe free.
So we're setting United States immigration policy based off a 136-year-old poem? That'll solve everything. Thanks for watching, sharing, and hitting that like button. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Check out the links in the description and check out these videos that you may have missed. Thanks again for stopping by, and I hope to see you next time.